So what do you do when at your company there is already an OEE measurement, but it is way off and giving a lot higher OEE percentage numbers in the KPIs that have been registered for a long time than what you just found out with your measurements over the last couple of weeks? You're in a pickle, but let's get out of it. Hello, I'm Tom. Welcome to my channel where we talk about continuous improvement in an industrial setting. And this video is an answer to a viewer question by Alexei on a previous video that I had on launching CI at a factory. So, спасибо, Лоша, за вопрос. Очень интересная. And we are going to go into, if you start OEE registration, so overall equipment effectiveness, the measurement standard for how well your machines are working, basically. And you see that there is already a system that is being used. And this is actually quite common because OEE it's a big international thing. Many companies use it, many factories will implement it, and it will say something about how effective are their lines. So the chance that this is already implemented is enormous. The chance that it is implemented poorly is also quite big if there was not a serious big lean type of program rolled out. Now, the answer he gives is, well, you go into the factory and you do some checks and you get, for instance, a 70% OEE, but in the books they're registering 95% OEE and basically saying nothing's wrong. Our machines are, at maximum capacity, basically, and what are we going to do? A couple of things are usually happening, and this is also the answer you can find in the comments I gave to that video, but I'll go through them a bit more in how to account for it and solve it. But when the answers lie in one of two classes, which is a lot of time is not accounted for at all, or you can in principle see that there is a negative speed loss, so a speed gain when you fully fletch out all the calculations in your OEE calculation, then we have a solution for you. And if not, we will push it into those categories. So there is really a way to work with that. Now first, let's write out what OEE is in the basic formula, right? Your basic OEE calculation is how much effective time did I have in my total time. Now, how we should be reading this is how much product did I make divided by the line maximum speed or the nameplate capacity and divided by 24/7. But we'll toy a bit with both of them. But first, let me also put that onto the board so that we can use it for reference. So this is what it should be. Output divided by nameplate capacity, which is the, let's say, the theoretical max speed. There are some ways to calculate it, discuss it. It is a political number. The machine builder will usually give a nameplate capacity. You can also discuss on what is the maximum setting, stuff like that. But there is a number that is the maximum speed that this machine would be achieving in ideal situations. And we divide it by all the time there is. What we often will see is that, and let's start with total time, there are some things that we will not take into account. That is, that we often don't take into account. Like, for instance, weekends, maintenance, cleaning. Now, not every company will ignore all of them, but what you will very often see is that when you are closed for the weekend, so you have only a 5-day work week, then usually people will calculate OEE as the output per nameplate capacity divided by 24/5, so to say, which I think is legit. And that doesn't mean that I think it's the perfect calculation. I think it is very smart to do it in this way because it tells you much more about your process. But you do get onto a sliding scale. So if you don't work night shifts, so for instance, your factory is only open 16 hours per day, do you then divide by 16 times 5, or for one day divide by 16? And maybe yes, maybe no. And this sliding scale continues, and this is where the problem comes from, because when you are planned out for maintenance, I mean, you are not running the line, right? It's not intended to produce anything when you plan it out for a whole day, so let's also get rid of that time. And this big cleaning that you do at the beginning of the end of the day, it's not production time, now is it? So you can see where it comes from, but a lot of time is taken out of the total by many companies where OEE is sort of introduced, but not completely with a full set and a full program behind it. And this way, we will be pumping up the number a lot, of course, because the real overall equipment effectiveness does take everything into account. And one of the things you will be saying is, well, we put this huge expensive line here that is producing widgets, and because we are only working it, let's say 10 shifts, so 2 shifts each day, and not at night and not in the weekends, we are losing half of our productive time. So that OEE is never going to be more than 50% to begin with, if everything's going ideal in the time that we are running it. Now, from a capital investment point of view, this is accurate. I mean, if you are going to put a very expensive line into a factory, you should really think about, do I need this huge line for the capacity to serve the market? Or would it perhaps be a better business choice to open up my factory time? So to start to include night shifts, maybe also work completely throughout the weekend, and just make sure that I use my current equipment to the maximum potential. But on a day-to-day, it's really not very nice to hear, let's say, as a production manager or an operator on this line that is not working at night and weekend, that, well, first off, your OEE can never be more than 50%. So you're wasting 50% of your time. This is not even correct. That operator is not wasting 50% of their time, because they use a different total time slot. And the weekends go off. Now, the same logic goes for maintenance and maybe even for cleaning, although this I think is the least excusable. But do know that this happens. And my first advice would be, let it happen. Just make sure that you do register this time. And then we'll put it into something else than OEE, but we'll get into that. Now, the other thing is that the output, that one is difficult to mess up. Of course, even here you can do it, right? So on output, what you will often see is that all products coming off the line are all registered as good output, even if after, for instance, assembly or order picking or somewhere later down the line, half of the products is wasted because, well, there were defects, not good, whatever we're doing with them, we did register them all. That is also a problem, but this is usually not the problem that makes a big dent in your OEE registration. The big dent comes from putting a way too low nameplate capacity there. And to get that, what you do is when you stand next to the line with your stopwatch and just count how many products are coming off in a minute or in 10 minutes, that is one way of checking the nameplate capacity, but what you're actually checking is the current speed of the machine. Now, if you do this in an even broader, so first off, here we do get the problem that if somebody set the line at a lower speed than the line could be making, you're already having a wrong count, right? You're taking speed losses into account when making your nameplate capacity. But if you go a level higher, so you're going to measure, for instance, how many products are coming off the line in an hour or so, or a couple of hours of good production. In this case, you are sure to take into account all the speed losses and the short stops and maybe even some small breakdowns that happen along the way, or maybe even a couple of routine stops, like the setup of putting a new ingredient or a new packaging roll on the line, things like that, will be already included in your effectiveness, in your speed, if you are going to measure on the scale of a couple of hours. If you use this measurement for a very nice production day without big breakdowns, and you take that as your nameplate capacity, and then you will even have certain days that will go over 100% OEE. Yeah, that is a problem, isn't it? We cannot have more than 100% OEE. Although I would say also this one, let it go. So the nameplate capacity if it is measured in practice, there is a big chance that this number is way too low. Now, what do we do? As with the things that were not taken into total time, we register it all. We take the NPC. Now, there is one thing here that will become important, and that is to also register your breakdowns and your short stops. So we need to be able to make a registration of the small things happening during normal production. So with this NPC, we also measure important to measure short stops and setups. And I mean the small setups, like changing a packaging roll or going from one to another product buffer, stuff like that. These are so short. I mean, they usually take a couple of minutes, less than 5 minutes, right? Maybe half a minute, 3 minutes to get one trolley out of the way, put a new trolley there, put it into the machine, and it continues again. These are the small things that happen during the day, during normal production. Now, they cost time. So if you do this maybe 20 times a day and it costs you 5 minutes, you've lost more than 1.5 hours. So like this, we start to register them. What will then happen is that these we do not take up into the total time yet, but we are going to say this is what we measure, and there are going to be two very nice aspects going on. First off, let's take the wrong total time, and with this going out, especially somewhere, well, if you take even the big cleanings out, what we get without weekends, maintenance, big cleanings, we get operational effectiveness. So, and we can discuss it like this. At first, by the way, we keep calling it OEE. That is actually advice number one. Measure it, call this OEE, because everyone in the company has been calling it OEE. Keep doing it until the registrations get online, you get trust from management, and also in the meantime start checking if anyone's personal financial bonus is reliant upon OEE numbers, because when this is the case, really don't change it unless you have very serious management backing, and that management is also okay with changing the parameters for the personal bonuses, because when you are touching people's money like this, but in a way that will be perceived like changing the rules of the game, because you are suddenly changing how you calculate their bonuses, even though those rules are more correct, that's unfair. And as soon as it becomes unfair, people will start to frustrate your process. And your goal is not to have the ideal OEE calculation. Your goal is to improve the business that you're running, make those lines work more effectively. So first we keep calling it OEE, but after some time we will say, look, what we have been measuring is operational effectiveness. This is a very good KPI for the daily meeting in the factory. Super, because we can really check, we can compare shift to shift. We can compare a week that had a lot of maintenance to a week without maintenance. We can compare a day with the big weekly cleaning to other days. So it's a very good parameter, also a ratio in equipment effectiveness to have. But there is more. This time cannot simply be given back or spent. We should take it into account. Let's have overall or total equipment effectiveness and operational effectiveness. And like this, you get the correct discussions within your company. Now, the other part with the nameplate capacity, if you have this problem with a pre-existing OEE registration and something in that short stop speed loss thingy is not going well, leave speed losses open. So what you will see is to get to this calculation, the output times NPC, so we have a calculated effective time through what we put out, and we have a calculated effective time from the total minus all the losses. The open thingy that is going to equalize those two times, those two effective times, is going to be speed losses. Now, normally when everything is set up correctly, what you will see is that there is also a couple of percents, or maybe zero, but maybe some tenths of a percent or even percents of loss, even when you take out all those time wastes. That means that your line is running a bit slower than what you had planned. Or actually not what you had planned, than what it could be doing, the NPC. In this case, however, that term will become negative. So we get to a negative speed loss, a speed gain. And of course, this is not a loss. Technically, this cannot happen, because that means that we are going faster than the fastest capacity, the fastest speed of our machine. We just let it happen, because this means that the OEE number itself will still be very comparable. We can still compare one week to another, and at some point before the budgeting process, you start the discussion and you say, look, we've been having this speed gain. So basically, our nameplate capacities are not completely correct. So either we are killing our machine by going way faster than is the safe speed for this machine, and not just people safe, but also machine safe. So maybe we are just destroying the mechanics of the machine, wearing it down by overburdening the metal, the parts, the machine. Then we should probably slow down the machine a bit, or make the choice that we are doing this and are going to have to reinvest quite soon. Or more likely, although the first case really does happen, more likely we put a practical, a measured nameplate capacity in place. Let's put the real maximum speed of this line in place and change the OEE numbers starting from the next budget year. So often 1st of January next year, but put it into the budget of next year. Make sure management knows what is going to happen, that they understand that suddenly this drop from December having an OEE of 80 to January having an OEE of 60, that this is not an actual drop. This is just an accounting drop, a number drop. The machine is performing at least as well, and solve it in this way. So for quite some time, you will be having a speed gain. It just means that instead of steering in your daily meetings that you should be happy with, at this moment, happy with an OEE of 60%, your factory has to be only happy with an OEE of over 85, because that, with all the strange tricks that they had been doing, was their target, was achievable. Basically, OEE in a practical sense, you just need to be as good as you know you can be, right? If you have an OEE of 50%, many people will tell you, wow, that is way off world-class standards. There is so much improvement potential on that line. But you are not going to improve that tomorrow. So knowing that you have a low OEE does not give you anything to directly solve and increase that OEE. The only thing that it really tells you is that when you are today under 50, and especially seriously under 50, then you have a problem that you can fix. And when you are at 55 or so, you are probably at your current best. So don't spend too much time on today's 55 OEE, so today's 45% of time loss. There is one unique moment when you are launching or relaunching your continuous improvement program, lean, or putting TPM into place, or there's this big corporate overhaul of your continuous improvement culture. That is an ideal moment to bite the bullet. Everyone will understand that some changes will be made, and it's the ideal moment to say, look, colleagues, we've been handling this wrong. In the last years, our registrations have not been correct, and we are going to change it. Nobody's bonuses are going to be touched. This is not going to affect anyone's performance. Personally, we are going to put these new numbers into place, and we're going to train you in a new way how to put everything on paper in the correct way and also interpret those numbers the correct way. So when you do a relaunch, ideal moment to also change it. Just as a continuous improvement professional, know that your goal is not to have an ideal OEE calculation. Your goal is to actually get the discussion going on how do we solve our time wasters and how do we improve the effectiveness of our equipment. And for that, well, we can have the discussion in the comments, and please do comment on this. My take on it is, I don't really care which OEE percentage is on the paper, as long as we have a discussion that improves that OEE percentage. To me, almost everything is fair game. And when we've been working with it for some time, then we'll get back to it, and then we'll make it right. I have the time to correct it. It's better to really spend your effort in improving what can be improved on the shop floor with your equipment. So I hope that answered at least, Alexei, your question, but also was valuable information, valuable idea for many of us in the community. And if you did like this video, don't forget to push that like button. And as I suggested in the comments, please continue the discussion and share your beliefs and feelings on how do we handle non-correct registration. Which parts of registration really have to be correct, which parts are probably not as important as long as you know that it's happening. That's all for now. I wish you the best of luck with your registration, and as always, enjoy your lean journey.